Good morning, fellow St. Lucians at home and abroad. Good morning, all listeners. I'm your host, Dr. Anderson Reynolds at Roof Tropics Media. Today is a very special day for me and Roof Tropics because we are about to present the first installment of my show, Conversations with Dr. Anderson Reynolds, which starting this morning will air every Thursday, 9 to 10 a.m. As you can well imagine, we are excited to bring you Conversations with Dr. Anderson Reynolds so as to engage you with in-depth discussions on St. Lucian art and culture, discussions on the pressing social, political, economic, and developmental issues confronting the country, and also discussions on how the diaspora and St. Lucians at home can work together to bring about meaningful, mutually beneficial change. Allow me first to wish all St. Lucians a happy 43rd Independence Anniversary, and also to send special greetings to my fellow St. Lucians in the diaspora, because while we are mindful of our audience at home, Roof Tropics Media represents a departure from other media houses in its focus on catering for the St. Lucian diaspora. My 20-year sojourn in North America, first as a university student, and then as a corporate economist with Southwestern Bell, and also my 2017-2018 international book tour with stops in several cities, including London, Toronto, New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and Hartford, Connecticut, impressed upon me the importance of treating St. Lucia and the diaspora as one continuous cultural and economic space, and the synergetic value of at-home St. Lucians working together with St. Lucians abroad. I wish to say hello and thank you to all the members of the various St. Lucian associations and St. Lucian embassies and missions that accommodated me on my tour. Thanks very much. It was great meeting you, and thanks for the support. With this in mind, Roof Tropics Media intends to serve as a vehicle to strengthen linkages between St. Lucians at home and those residing overseas, facilitate greater exchange between the two groups, and enable the diaspora to play a more active role in the affairs of the country. As such, Conversations with Dr. Anderson Reynolds will feature guests from both St. Lucia and the diaspora. But this morning, make sure your seatbelt is well fastened, because my first guest on the very first episode of Conversation with Anderson Reynolds, is none other than St. Lucian cultural icon and esteemed poet, novelist, dramatist, painter, and photographer, MacDonald Dixon, with his newly published history-making crime mystery novel, A Scream in the Shadows, that is already attracting praise from readers and critics alike. Mr. Dixon, who in an earlier life or parallel life was a banker and a trade consultant, is the author of 4 novels, including his latest, A Scream in the Shadows. He is also the author of several books of poetry, a book of short stories, and the author of no less than 13 plays. Besides writing, Dixon is an accomplished painter and photographer. MacDonald Dixon is truly a St. Lucian cultural icon. According to esteemed St. Lucian poet John Robert Lee, Dixon served as a mentor to him and several other St. Lucian writers, and by example, he opened the door to such writers as Kendall Hippolyte, Jane King, Adrian Auger, Modest Downs, and Robert Lee himself, who today, all of these poets are among the top echelon of St. Lucian writers. MacDonald Dixon is arguably St. Lucia's most complete artist. Multiple award-winning St. Lucian poet, Modest Downs, proclaimed that Dixon is a more complete writer than Derek Walcott. High praise indeed. So it is no wonder that MacDonald Dixon was awarded the CDF Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions to St. Lucian art and culture. Mr. Dixon, welcome. Thanks for visiting with us at Roof Tropics Media, and congratulations on your newly published novel, A Scream in the Shadows.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But while you were there talking about me, I was looking over my shoulder to see if we were talking about some other guy. You know. I can't believe that I did all those things in the brief time I've been on the side.
Yes, you have done plenty, and I think the country is highly appreciative of what you have contributed. And what we mentioned is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I ain't too sure about the country, I'll be honest with you. But I know the people know me.
Yes.
Because I may have walked with kings, but I've never lost the common touch.
All right, that's good. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Dixon, I'm always intrigued by beginnings, by potential waiting to be realized, by promises waiting to be fulfilled. Could you tell us how you first got into creative writing? What motivated you to pick up a pen and begin your heroic journey of giving artistic voice to St. Lucian culture? And what about writing? Or what does writing do for you that has made you turn it into a lifetime occupation, even though the financial rewards may be meager?
Well, it all began when I was in about, I think, Form 4 at college. I went to the school library, and I saw this little dusty pamphlet at the back of a shelf. And I pulled it up, and it was 25 poems by Derek Walcott. And I started reading. And the strange thing, I became dumbstruck with what I saw on the page. My problem was that I had never read anything like that. All my poems dealt with maple, poplar, oak, and elm. And here was a man talking about teak, mahogany, breadfruit. You know, what's going on here? And the poetry has the same rhythmic beauty as anything written by Shakespeare, for that matter, like Shakespeare's sonnets, because if anybody who knows 25 poems, there are a lot of sonnets in there. And it was years later when I had conversations with Derek about his own writing and how he began. And he told me how he used to clone the sonnets by Shakespeare and getting words to fit in his own poetry, that I realized I was doing the same thing. You know, trying, and we all had people like William Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Tennyson as our mentors, because we had no other thing but English literature.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it had, I have to say, it was that little book of 25 poems that made me realize I could write. Okay.
By the way, folks, 25 poems was the first collection of poems published by Derek Walcott.
In 1948.
In 1948, and it was self-published. Actually, I'm told that he had great difficulty accumulating the funds to publish. He went all about...
His mother lent him the money.
I'm told his mother cried when she saw her son having such difficulty getting his book published, that she cried and loaned him the money herself. And Derek Walcott printed his book and went about selling it to recoup his costs. Just a bit of history. Yes. Okay, let me move on to my second question. Folks, did you know that the 1950s St. Lucia Arts Guild sparked a cultural renaissance, during which St. Lucia led the way in Caribbean theater, and out of which emerged many of St. Lucia's most notable cultural creators, including poet, playwright, and Nobel laureate Derek Walcott, playwright Roderick Walcott, painter Sir Destin Saint-Omer, novelist Gav Saint-Omer, probably St. Lucia's first novelist, musical composer Charles Cadet, who died a few years ago, playwright and essayist Stanley French, and poet and novelist and playwright MacDonald Dixon, who is honoring us with his presence this morning. Folks, even the great George Odlum was a product of this cultural revolution. So tell us, Mr. Dixon, what was it like being part of this art and cultural movement, being part of St. Lucia's exalted history?
Well, the Arts Guild, just to put it in perspective, started in 1950. In 1950, I was nothing more than a toddler. But I joined the Arts Guild on leaving school, so that would put me between 1962 63 when I left St. Mary's College. And I joined the Arts Guild, and I worked through the ranks. I was a prompter, a screen puller, because in those days, between every scene, you had to draw the screen so that they could set up the stage. You know, the primitive days before lighting, proper lighting. And I did all those jobs. And then I was a prompter, prompting actors on the stage. And then somebody said he had a good voice. And I remember being cast as Caesar in Julius Caesar in 1964. That's one of my early roles, you know. And I moved from there. In 67, Walcott realized that I was writing plays, and there was a shortage of directors, so he decided he would train me, and that's Roddy Walcott, not Derek. And he trained me as a director. And the first play I directed was The Mock Doctor, which is a West Indian translation, I would say, from the French by Molière, Le Médecin malgré lui, the doctor in spite of himself. So that was my first attempt at directing around 1967.
Okay, but tell me, this is the facts, but tell me, how did it feel? What was the vibe like being among all of those greats to be? What was the vibe? What was the whole atmosphere?
Very ordinary. There was nothing sophisticated. You got your jokes. If you made a mistake, you got ribbed on. If you were good, you got applauded. And life was there were no greats among us, because on your night you could exceed or excel anyone, you know, because when you're in a hall full of talent, you never think of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, okay? You always try to admire the other one. And then by doing that, you exceed, okay?
So how would you compare, contrast what's happening on the St. Lucia cultural landscape with this 1950s Arts Guild? Or is there any difference? What's different between now and then? In terms of,
there's been a migration. Electronics came in the 70s, and now you've gone beyond that. You've gone beyond electronics. Now you can have a studio just with a few components. You know, in our day you had all these big truckloads of equipment and so on. So you find that a lot of people have gone into recording and even e-books and all these new avenues. So the talent is still there. There's a lot of talent. The only weakness we have is that a lot of our young performers do not want to go through the learning curve. The biggest mistake that happens to them...
They are too much in a hurry?
Yes. The biggest mistake that happens to them is when the news call them a poet or call them writer or so on, and nobody wants to take the necessary criticisms, because I benefited from criticisms, good, bad, and indifferent. And up to now, if you knock my work, I will stand up and take it. But you have to come good. Know what you're talking about. And I listen. And a good writer lives and thrives on criticism. It's not always on applause.
True.
Okay?
I quite agree, because a long time ago, in the olden days, we didn't have so many writing programs, university courses in writing. Basically, publishers pair writers with an editor. And through that collaboration, the writer develops his craft through suggestions by the editor. And over time, the author comes onto his own. So that is quite correct. So what would be the takeaway for you and possibly for other St. Lucians from what happened in the 1950s Arts Guild? What lessons are there to learn from that era, from that movement?
I will answer that question with an example. I had this poem, Castries Revisited. It won an award and everything. And Derek told me, you have a draft of that poem? I saw it, I read it the other day. Bring it. Come with it. He was here on holiday. I brought down the poem. He went through the poem. It's about 3 pages long. And he just drew a red pencil. I wouldn't tell you what he said. It's not for the airwaves.
For general audience.
And I said, why? He says, the name of the poem is Castries Revisited. What is Castries? I told him, a city. Okay, it's a city. Where are the people? So I wrote a whole poem on a city, talking about buildings and atmosphere and everything, and no people.
Yeah.
And I'm the writer, I hadn't seen that. But it took another writer. Now you think that today I can watch a young aspiring writer who's been praised by the media and whose work has won an award and tell him that he's writing bullshit?
Well,
Come on, man. You can't do that today. It's a different temperature, man.
You fear you might get some blows if you do?
No, I'm not afraid of blows, but the kind of invective that I would get, I would learn everything about my mother that I never knew.
And then we are a small society. We cannot get away from each other.
We meet each other on the sidewalk
regularly.
Yeah.
At most events, it's the same group of people I run into, which is basically us.
Let me tell you, we're not even 200,000 strong yet. You know?
Yeah, I know. I'm going back to the first question because you said something very interesting, which reminded me of something Destin St. Thomas said. Because you said before 25 Poems by Derek Walcott, your idea of poetry was probably what you read, the British poets, and they were talking about maybe snow, the changing of the seasons, and so on and so on. But when you read Derek Walcott, it made you realize that what obtains in St. Lucia is good material, proper material, good enough for poetry, for art and culture. So this reminded me of Dunstan St. Thomas. He said before he ran into Harold Simmons, by the way, folks, Harold Simmons is considered the father of St. Lucian high culture. He was the mentor of Derek Walcott, Dunstan St. Thomas, and many such young aspiring artists at the time. Dunstan St. Thomas said he used to go to the library and copy the European greats because he thought what art was about, what these people were doing, the cathedrals they were painting, the European sceneries they were depicting. But when he teamed up with Harold Simmons and first visited Harold Simmons' studio, Harold Simmons was a painter among other things, he saw in his paintings breadfruit tree, bananas, black people, St. Lucian scenes. And suddenly he realized that St. Lucian scenery, St. Lucian people, St. Lucian culture is good enough, is admissible for art and culture. And from there, he started copying his mentor and started depicting, giving more emphasis to what obtains in St. Lucia in his art. I'm sure you are well familiar with Dunstan St. Thomas' history, Dixon.
Well, Dunstan was my first mentor as a little boy of about 6. After the 1951 fire, when my grandmother's house got burnt in St. Louis Street, we were housed at Block H, Apartment 3 in the CDC. Yeah. And Dunstan St. Thomas lived with his father and his sister at Block H, Apartment 1. But as a little boy, I was in the infant school at the Anglican school. I knew my way to school and back, so I had to pass in front of Block H, Apartment 1 to get to where my mother lived. And so I would see this guy on the porch painting.
Yeah.
And one day I got the guts to stop. And he said, his own description, he said he saw this little curly hair just bob up over the rails on the veranda and say, "What you doing there?" And he says, "Painting," his big voice, And I said, "Let me see." And I came and I was enthralled. I still remember vaguely, although it could be contributed memory by people repeating it, himself repeating it. He was painting this woman who was a fisherwoman by the sea, collecting fish to maybe go and resell or to clean. I can't remember. But the scene was a canoe, fisherman, and this woman. I remember he was working the skirt, you know. Can't remember the colors or anything, but very, very vividly. And boom, it was an epiphany. Because like him, in my school books, I was fortunate to have had both Royal Crown and Nelson readers. In the Nelson readers, I had Caribbean scenes. And in the Royal Crown, we had the English scenes, battles like Tel el-Kibar, Charge of the Light Brigade, and this kind of thing. So you had these majestic pictures, which as a child attracted you more than a market scene. But now seeing the market scene now in color, because again, a lot of these were photographs, and then therefore they were in black and white if they were not tinted. So seeing it now in color on canvas, well, he painted on hardboard, not canvas, you freaked out. And I remember taking odds and ends from his own hardboard that he had primed and charcoal. And I remember getting licks from my grandmother for painting up the wall in charcoal, because when you put charcoal on a wall, it doesn't come off like that, you know, my friend. Okay.
You are an accomplished painter, so would you say, I guess this is one of the influences?
Well, I started painting first. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, you were a painter before a poet?
I painted for years. At St. Mary's College, I painted, I won competitions. I sold my work in the 60s.
The great Derek Walcott was also a painter. I don't know whether painting was his first love also.
Oh yes, they all
painting was
because Harry Simmons was an artist, and the weave with Harry Simmons was painting. The only exception to the group was Leo Sparr St. Helen, who was a photographer. You know, and also was among my mentors.
Okay.
You know, I was fortunate to know all three, or even four, because we tend to forget Roddy, the twin brother. I knew all four, and I knew Harry, because when Harry died, I was working already.
How would you compare your painting with Derek Walcott? Were you a better painter than him?
We don't do this. I abhor this kind of.
You don't like those kind of comparisons.
This kind of comparing people and comparing, right? We each have our strengths in our own world. Okay, there are people that would like my work. There are people that would like his work.
Yes.
But the guy's a genius. I'm not.
Yes.
You know?
Well, I know with regard to poetry, he's probably untouchable. But with regard to painting,
well, no one is untouchable in art. No one is untouchable in art. Look, man, some of the finest poems in the English literature, and perhaps in the world, was not written by Shakespeare. But yet Shakespeare is considered one of the finest poets of the language.
That's true.
You know? So we have to be very careful when we start being competitive.
Yes.
There is competitive and competition.
Yeah,
you can compete with one another. But when we begin to do comparisons, let's say one is better than the other, and as an artist, I would not do that.
Yes.
That's dangerous. Okay, it breeds for insularity, it breeds for petty jealousies, and all kinds of harmful
and people not helping each other,
the
not collaborating.
Harmful sins that occur. I have no scruples in helping a young, old, or indifferent artist get over a hurdle.
Yes.
And I would hope that if I had such a request of another artist, I would find it as well. Because art is a selfless occupation.
Yes.
You are alone out there, my friend. Okay? And nobody's going to throw you a bone.
It's a very lonely enterprise.
Show me the serious writer that doesn't suffer from depression, and I'll show you a fake.
All right. So with that note, Mr. Dixon, let's move on to talk about your book, A Scream in the Shadows. By the way, congratulations on the publication and launch of your fourth book, A Scream in the Shadows, which from all accounts is a history-making novel in that it represents the first crime mystery novel, the first St. Lucian crime mystery novel.
We better be careful about that. It's not.
Let me define it. Let me define it.
Okay. Right.
Meaning, what they are saying is the first crime mystery novel set in St. Lucia and offered by a St. Lucian.
But it may not be.
It may not
because if you read Garth St. Thomas' CO, you'd have to classify it. What is it?
Okay.
You know, there is also a novella by Markey. I can't remember the name. I can't remember. Which is a sort of detective.
Victor Markey.
Victor Markey, yeah.
A novel called Search.
Yeah. If you read it, where is it classified? You see, we have to be careful when I don't like the epitaphs of first and first. You know?
Yeah, you don't like those. Yeah. Also, Jolene Hampson do have a crime novel called Rum Justice,
yeah,
set in the South.
Yeah.
But she's a national of the Netherlands, but she's a long-time resident of
St. Lucian by now. Huh?
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful with first. I notice we have a tendency to be first in everything, even in diabetes. So
even in the negative.
Yeah, we have to be very careful. Man.
Okay. So how did you feel to see CDF, FRC, and many in the artist community coming together to celebrate with you and lend their support? And can you tell us more about Us Scream in the Shadows? Why should St. Lucians at home and abroad, and in general the reading public, go grab a copy of your book and start reading?
Okay. First, I must thank the artist community and the government institutions for assisting in the launch of my book. I was very pleased to see a lot of faces that I worked with at various times, and also cross generations who took part in the presentation at the launch of my book. You know, what's the book about? The book is about, there was a phase in our history not too long ago where almost every year some poor young lady was being brutally murdered by some culprit somewhere. The book is a collective. It is fictional. It's a collective. It's set in a fictitious village in the district of Dennery, which does not exist.
Yes.
The location.
Yeah.
And the images, though drawn from life, are fictitious.
Yes.
But it is a representative of what goes on in the society, and some of which is silent.
Yes.
The one thing that I abhor is the cruelty of partners on each other in relationships, man or woman. Okay? The beatings, the black eyes, the black thighs, the putting on rings to hurt, and so on. And there's a lot of hate coming out of this, and that hate is manifested in the eyes of their children. And we ask why there's so much killing around. I mean, come on, man. Where did it begin? You know, it began with that bestial cruelty that we have in the manifestation of our love for each other. You know, and it gets me angry when I think that it still proceeds, and the law is a joke when it comes to that. I just hope, I heard recently the Honorable Minister, whom I have a lot of time for and a lot of regard, she says that a new act is on the drawing books, and hopefully it will be soon passed in the House. I'm looking forward to reading the act, because I think we have to tighten up that area if we are going to clean up our society. Okay? Because the children are the products of that society.
You are quite right. So your book is really
it deals with violence in the home,
domestic violence,
and
spousal abuse,
and violence on women,
and how all that impact on the children.
It impacts on the society and on the children. Yeah.
Yes, I think your book is very topical, very relevant, because today we are facing an increasing crime rate. Definitely, Us Scream in the Shadows is a very timely and topical creative work, because, as you know, crime in St. Lucia has climbed to unprecedented heights in recent years. The 74 murders committed last year were the highest in the nation's history. We have just entered the third month of 2022, yet the country has witnessed no less than 10
You mean the highest in modern history?
in modern history.
Because we don't know how many poor black grandfathers and grandmothers that were murdered under the bush just because they're too weak to cocaine.
Yes, yes, we have to, if we look at the slavery era and the era just after slavery, well, the number of murders,
74 is a joke.
it's probably, we cannot compare. So yes, you are quite correct. In the modern era, this is the highest number of murders we have had in any given year. In fact, it boggles my mind that a country so small can have so many murders go unsolved. That's the other shocking thing is, given our size, you hear a lot of murders, but you don't hear about the murderers being apprehended and punished. Your novel seems to suggest there are serious problems with the St. Lucia criminal justice system. Is that one of the issues you wanted to raise in your novel, and that we have a flawed criminal justice system?
Well, I would prefer to say that it was one of the casualties of the story. It had to come in to prop up the story. But it is also a problem that needs urgent attention. I would not gloss over it. It needs the support of every citizen of this country. Because in a way, we are all being starved of proper justice. There is some form of justice, but this is not in keeping with the level to which our civilization has risen to in the last 50 years.
Yes, and reading A Scream in the Shadows, our justice system seems to take a long time to work. It took, 14, 17 years. Somebody accused, maybe a suspect spent 14, 17 years for murder. It seems like our justice system is very slow. And so my question is, we know, given that there is a problem with our criminal justice system, what are your thoughts on how the country can go about curbing its rising crime rate? Any thoughts on that?
I am not a criminologist, and I don't like trespassing on the toes of others who have made this their discipline. So I think I will pass on that.
Okay.
This is something more in the days when I used to take my little shot of scotch and so on the side, where you debate over a bar, but it doesn't mean that your input is meaningful or anything. It's just that you're blowing steam.
Yeah.
So I would let that pass. I'm not a criminologist.
So you
I can only tell you what I feel.
Yes.
And I don't think that sometimes that is fair.
Yes. Yeah. That's fair enough. Let me move on. I would like to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, one of the focus of Roof Tropics Media is to cater for the diaspora. In fact, this is one of the ways Roof Tropics Media is distinguishing itself from other media houses. As for me, I am convinced that there is great value in treating the diaspora as an extension of St. Lucian culture and economic space. And there are significant synergies to be realized from on-island and off-island St. Lucians working together. St. Lucian soccer artists know that very well and have profited from their linkages with the diaspora for years. So too is Shekampesh, the St. Lucian hit theater group. Do you see the diaspora as a viable market for your books? Have you given much thought on how best to reach the St. Lucian diaspora? Rather than leaving it to chance, could there be a systematic, consistent approach of St. Lucian authors establishing and maintaining links with the diaspora? For example, as soon as a St. Lucian author launches a book, how can St. Lucians throughout the diaspora be made aware of the book and the book be made readily available to them for purchase? The challenge I am exploring is, how can St. Lucian authors and their books become as well known to the diaspora as the soca artists and their music?
Well, you have a vehicle in social media, and if you all writers, I invite them to explore every avenue of social media that they can to promote their work, because right now my work is being sold in London.
Okay.
You know, in fact, my publisher is both Popular Press, with whom I must take this opportunity to thank for giving me the opportunity to be published with them. They have offices both in London and Dominica, you know, so they have a Caribbean route, but also diaspora route.
Yes.
And first of all, I don't like the word diaspora. I don't think there's anything as a diaspora. I think what it is, these are St. Lucian settlements outside of St. Lucia, you know. And when I'm in Paddington, I feel I'm in St. Lucia. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I talk patois, Creole, as we call it. I remember as a young man when I'm going to school, I was up in London, and I saw the boys playing football, and they were playing black boys against the whites. And the guys were talking in Creole on the whites, passing the ball, pass the ball, do this, do that, you know. But they were talking with a heavy English accent.
Yeah.
I felt at home.
Yeah.
Right away. And that's in Paddington by Mozart, there in the back.
Okay.
Off 2nd Avenue. Because when I was in London, I stayed at number 14 2nd Avenue. You know?
Yes.
Most of the time I was in Manchester. In Manchester, I lived in Disley,
Yes.
which is a little town which doesn't have too many West Indians. So you can imagine boarding that train on a Friday afternoon, taking the 2-3 hour drive into London, and then reaching into St. Lucia.
Yeah.
When King's Cross, I think, is either King's Cross or the other station, used to be the station. When I land there, I'm straight to Paddington, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, at home.
Like
and I had a weekend job, but it was a night job, so by the time I reached, I could bathe and get ready to go to work. But I don't know, funny enough, Brooklyn and the Bronx as well. As I only got to know Brooklyn and the Bronx when my wife fell sick in the late 90s.
So you are more familiar with the UK.
Because her sisters live up there.
Yeah.
But I'm more familiar with the UK. I've been a student up there. I spent a lot of time up there. And I spent a lot of time all over London.
Yeah.
I mean, on a Sunday, I would get up and walk or hop a bus and then take the train back. So, and I learned London inside out, you know, and not just the city, you know, even the outer boroughs.
Yeah,
you know?
Part of the reason I'm stressing the diaspora, because when I went, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, in 2017, 2018, I went on what I call an international book tour, where I visited London, Toronto, and several cities in the US. And on my tour, these were the most appreciative audiences I've read to, especially London. The St. Lucian audiences I read to overseas showed much greater appreciation. They seem to have a greater hunger for St. Lucian culture, and for people like us going overseas, meeting them, they are so proud, they felt so proud, so appreciative. And so it made me wonder whether we are not fully exploring the market potential of the St. Lucians.
Why are we limiting to St. Lucian? Because the West Indian population out there is man immense. You know, when you bring in that Jamaican culture, and our cultures are not all that different to each other. You know, it's our colors of saying. It's different. But when you go into the culture itself, beginning with what we eat, what we talk, what attracts us, we are very, very similar people. And I see that all the time. And there are large West Indian enclaves in London, New York, Toronto. There is a growing one in, I think it's in Texas. I can't remember. I think it's Dallas. But Miami, you know, and of course Atlanta.
You are quite right. If we're talking about
target the Caribbean,
why limit ourselves just to St. Lucia? Why not broaden that market space to the whole Caribbean, West Indian diaspora? So you are quite right. So maybe on Rift Tropics Media, we need to refocus on the whole Caribbean rather than just St. Lucia.
Can you imagine the Haitian diaspora
Yes.
is much larger than the entire Caribbean, and I'm talking the English-speaking Caribbean put together?
And culturally speaking, we share the
Common heritage.
common language.
Yeah. And
yes,
heritage.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, Derek Walcott, one of his first plays that made it out internationally, is on the Haitian Revolution, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Henri Christophe.
Yes. Okay, moving on, Mr. Dixon. As I mentioned, Derek Walcott, Derek Walcott expressed bewilderment at the lack of government support and the shallow kind of lip service paid to us in CARICOM countries, when, according to him, we have only one strength, and that is our culture. He lamented, what will it take for government to give a few art scholarships each year to deserving artists? So, Mr. Dixon, we have a new administration in power that pledges to be people-centered, to put people first, to use art and culture to foster national identity, to ensure that African, Caribbean, and St. Lucian history are taught at all levels of our school system. What advice would you give Prime Minister Philippe J. Pierre on his government, on what his government should be doing to help support and nurture writers, and thus ensure that the pipeline of writers like yourself and the great Derek Walcott keeps flowing?
You're asking me to give advice to the Prime Minister, okay? It's true, in another life, I advised him when he was Minister of Commerce. But one advice that I think I can give, which is above politics, is for him to invest in his Minister of Culture. He has a young, vibrant Minister of Culture in Minister Hilaire, who I was very pleased to see, and I believe it was the first time in a long time that at the Derek Walcott Memorial Lecture, Nobel Lecture, both himself and the Prime Minister was present. And that augurs well for the future for the artists of St. Lucia.
Yes.
I have seen recently a show in Dubai where some young, talented St. Lucians appeared on stage in the musical genre.
Yes.
And that's very good.
Yes.
That international exposure is beyond price, okay? You're leaving a footprint out there,
yes,
which a lot of us did not have. You know, it's true that we reached out there because we put our toe, or big toe in the door, and we prevented from closing.
Yes.
And then we kept pulling and pulling until we ripped the damn door apart.
Yes.
You know? So we are known out there, fine. Okay? But it is for the others now to be able to pass through those portals.
True.
And to be able to pass through those portals, you need that little commodity they call finance. And I would like to see a fair, I'm not talking large, I'm talking a fair budget for the arts.
Yes.
Where the ministry can do the things that are necessary to be done. Now, art takes on all forms and patterns. There are some that are going to be starved.
Yeah.
And one must expect that. But let us at least see certain genres moving forward, you know, with the backing of the government behind them, and not a few isolated cases. For instance, every 2 or 3 years, there is a contingent that goes down to something called Carifesta.
Yes.
Carifesta is a big literary supermarket, you know.
True.
The host country don't have no time for you.
Yeah.
They put you in a little back room somewhere, and then they put up production somewhere. And at the end, nobody remembers your name until you appear at the next Carifesta. Okay?
So we don't get, so you are saying...
What is your mileage?
We don't get much mileage out of Carifesta?
That's just a show. Pappy show.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you reckon Dubai, in terms of getting mileage, in terms of showcasing us on the world stage, Dubai was a thumbs up?
Yes. Yes.
I was impressed
yes,
with it.
I don't care how much money it cost, but to everything there's a price.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Interestingly, this year, I don't know if it is because this year I paid more attention to our independence activities, but I was under the impression that despite COVID, despite that we couldn't go full out, I thought this independence celebration this year was very cultural. I don't know if it is the Dubai showcase that made me think so, but I was particularly impressed also with the legacy. Teddy Francis organized a legacy calypso show on the 26th. I thought that was fantastic. And also, I also enjoyed Dickitas Jules's lecture. I don't know if you had a chance to.
Yes, I heard it.
Yes.
I heard the lecture.
So I was kind of impressed with some of the activities for St. Lucia Independence. And let me say again, St. Lucians, everywhere you are, happy independence. And let us work together to make St. Lucia and the world a better place to live. So, Mr. Dixon, in another life or parallel life, you are a banker and a trade consultant. Could you compare and contrast your life as an artist and your life as a technocrat? How were you able to juggle the two? What did you get from creating art that was missing from the world of trade and finance?
Well, you're missing a very important ingredient in all of that. And there was also a married life.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is true.
Which is separate and distinct from those two. I have always been able, and don't ask me how, I can't explain it, to compartmentalize my brain. I can switch off from art and be a technocrat right there.
Yes.
My training is in finance and foreign trade. I read economics and law. Economics I use as a tool.
Yes.
And law I also use as a tool. I never practiced as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. But my majors are finance and foreign trade.
Foreign trade.
All right. And what I do, I realize that as an artist, in growing up, I don't want to starve. So I acquired a profession. I worked at the profession, and then in my off hours, I worked at my art.
Okay.
So I never wrote on the job, or created on the job, painted on the job.
You give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Yes, I worked your hours, and if there was overtime, I worked the hours for overtime too and drew the compensation. But when I got home, don't call me about the bank. All right? Okay?
Yeah.
All right? That was me.
All right.
So it was compartmentalized.
All right.
I mean, I became a full-time writer around 2015 or so when I finally retired, and I can say that I immediately saw the difference because I was able to take work and watch the work progress and then watch the rewrites.
In good time.
And in fair time, I wouldn't say good time, in fair time. But now I'm a consummate professional when it comes to writing. I have my fixed writing times and so on, and then I have my times when I can knock off.
All right. As soon as I found out that you are the new publisher, I wanted to ask you, what is different now with this publisher as opposed to when you were publishing but more on your own? What's the difference in terms of support, in terms of...
Look, first of all, I don't have marketing on my back.
Okay.
I brought down 200 copies of the book simply because we don't have a bookstore down here.
Yeah.
And that I can sell. I feel I can manage 200 copies of the book. Okay. Had we bookstores, the work would have been bookstores. I don't have time to market. My time is to write. Okay. And you know the pain in selling a book, man? Well, you know that more than me, man. I've seen you hustling with your little tree there,
Okay.
I'm sure some people pass and just snub up their nose. What's that, books? I thought he had some avocado pear or so.
They might call you a vendor.
Next thing, the CDB come behind you for your ticket. Where's your license? Okay.
Yeah. So it's much. So I see. It's much. You can just specialize, focus. Let somebody who's better at marketing
let them market
do your job,
That's not
and let you keep doing.
You know what I did years ago, man? I would publish the work, and as soon as I get back the money that I paid the printer and so to print the,
you done selling.
I finish selling. Sometimes I have 100 copies of the work at home, and when a friend passes, I give them one. You know, sometimes people tell me they want to buy, so I sell, and that's how it finished. So I brought on 1,000 copies of that thing. Well, that's one of my bestsellers. Season of Mist. Yeah, it's one of my bestsellers. It's been around since I think 2000.
And you told me that sold about
20,000
copies.
Yeah. But that is being sold through Amazon and these outlets. You don't have time to sell them.
So you might.
I brought on 1,000 copies of it, and I sold 1,000 copies over 5 years. That's to show you. I ain't got time for that. Yeah.
Let me ask you my final question, or should I? Yeah. Okay. Knowing what you know now after a lifetime involvement in the arts, what would you still be willing to encourage a young person to opt to take on a life as a writer?
If you have the talent, my friend, go for it.
it.
There's nothing wasted with talent. And I'll tell you, there's the old analogy of oil on water. If you have oil, you must rise to the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Dixon, we have just about run out of time. It was a pleasure having you on the show. You are one of as a writer myself, you are one of the writers that was there before me that I look up to.
Oh, thank you.
And it's always a great pleasure. I'm sure when I meet you and you see my smile, I'm sure it's always a great pleasure running into.
Well, I don't know if you're laughing at me. I have to be very serious. Because you look at that fool. I went and followed him.
Into persons like you, Kendall Hippolyte, Robert Lee, even Modest Downs, because I came into creative writing after academic work. I had done PhD already. I had worked 10 years in corporate America, work in academia. So I was already almost 40 when I started doing creative writing seriously. And you all guys started from teenage years.
I start from infant school if you have to take the art into account.
So when I was coming to St. Lucia, all what I wanted to do was to add my voice to the voices already there. And I think you all guys have been very gracious in facilitating me in that regard and in allowing me to join your ranks. So thanks very much, and it was a great pleasure having you. St. Lucians, Caribbean folks in the diaspora and in the West Indies, in the Caribbean, thank you for tuning in. We'll have much more for you every Thursday, 9 to 10. I'd also like to say thanks to Mr. Russell Lick, the founder of Roof Tropics Media, for giving me the opportunity to engage Caribbean people, the world for that matter, engage them in conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for Russell for giving me the opportunity, and thank you, Dr. Reynolds. I'm very happy. I came here. I was a little down this morning. I got up, but these are natural things that happen. And with all this praise, you certainly put me up. Yeah. I will be now walking on a cloud out of here. Thank you.
So maybe now you.
And thanks to the diaspora for following and listening. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Conversations with Dr. Anderson Reynolds. And this is the first program of its kind. I was really happy when, in speaking to Dr. Reynolds, asking him whether he had, whether anyone had asked him to host the program, and he said no. So I was really happy that he had not been, his work, his talent hadn't been solicited as yet, and Roof Tropics Media got first dibs at it. And what a monster of a guest, Mr. McDonald Dixon, who I will call back here to talk about Monday. And I know that Mr. Dixon knows about my maternal grandmother, and he promised to tell me some jokes about my maternal grandmother and his mother as well. So we're looking forward big time for that. Again, every Thursday from 9 to 10, Conversations with Dr. Anderson Reynolds. That is the name of the 1 hour program, only of course on Roof Tropics Media. So right now you'll be hearing the excitement in the voices of the various people who are coming in. We have our next program is already on with the host, Aaron Ross Iron Alexander. But I need to say goodbye to Mr. Dixon. So folks, right now we will have to play 90 seconds of a spiritual reflection, which is from Pastor Ben. And then when we come back, Aaron Ross Iron Alexander.